How is AI transforming the financial services sector, and what does that mean to you as a client? Our guest today is Jason Pereira. Jason is a well-known and accomplished financial planner and industry advocate. His commentary and writing have appeared in every major media outlet in Canada. He serves as a columnist currently, an advisory board member for the Globe and Mail's Globe Advisor. He was actually founding president of the Financial Planning Association of Canada, a director of the Institute for Advanced Financial Planners, and is a director of the Individual Finance and Insurance Decisions Center. He's also held various volunteer positions at IROC, FP Canada, the FPSB, and the CFA Institute, among others. Obviously, he's qualified. And today we are going to talk about AI and how it's impacting business operations and client relationships. Jason, welcome to the Leaders Transformation. We're glad to have you here today.
Thank you. I mean, all that makes me seem, I'm very tired just hearing it all, quite honestly. But I'll also
you're
say,
busy.
Yeah, we didn't get into is I've also become like the de facto advisor technology expert in the country just by nature of advising certain companies, and also podcasts over 300 episodes deep now on the topic. So I'm well known in the space.
Yeah. Well, actually, when I heard your name, and I forget exactly who recommended you, because I always like to do a shout out to the person that referred us a guest. I can't for the life of me find who that was, but I do know that I have several of my clients that are financial planners, and I reached out to one who I was talking to that day, and I said, "Have you heard of this Jason Pereira?" And he's like, "He's the GOAT." And I went, wow, says a lot coming from him. And so I was like, okay, so Jason, it is. We're going to talk about this topic. You're the go-to guy. So
excellent.
Yeah. So let's talk about so far, maybe the biggest impact of AI on financial services, and then we can drill down from there.
I think it's too early to say this has been the biggest impact that's happened yet, quite honestly. I mean, so let's unpack this for a second. What is artificial intelligence? And it's not something I'm going to get into the weeds of, because frankly, this turns into the geekiest conversation where we basically, debate, what shade of blue is blue. It's just too much. So, the definition I use when I present is quite simply, look, if Arthur C. Clarke's, if it looks like magic, if it's advanced enough, the technology, it's basically magic. Well, you know what? If it does things that humans were doing, and it does it in something other than a very simple algorithmic way, like I push button and this one result happens every time, and there's discretion that the system does, then there's a form of artificial intelligence there. So there's, to the average advisor, they haven't seen much of this yet. The most prominent player in the space right now, and I say prominent because they're still new being a couple of years old, only been in market for about 3 years, company called Conquest Planning out of Canada, that is also moving heavily in the US. I was just at a conference with them there. And they were the first to basically bring a form of artificial intelligence to financial planning. So the big reason, one of the big reasons or things they're going after is that the amount of time it takes to produce a financial plan is benchmarked at about 10 hours. And that includes time to basically collect information, talk to the clients, put it all in, do all the trial and error, figuring out what you should be doing. That's several hours in that process, and then produce the reports and then present them all and get consensus. They're trying to bring that down to nothing, or very, as little as possible. In fact, they like to boast that once the information's in there, it's like 45 minutes to get the thing done. So their artificial intelligence bot is quite honestly already in a position where it is testing more variables than a human has time for. And it is also telling me what to do next, potentially. And frankly, if I wanted to let it to calculate the plan itself on simple cases, I could. On simple cases, on occasion, I will, if it's simple enough. So anyone who's already discovered this, has seen and is using it effectively, has seen that something that was taking 10 hours with maybe a 4 to 5 hour chunk in the middle can get that down immensely. And that is really a forebearer of what is really going to be the big crux of what is happening, is that what's going to happen is a lot of the quote unquote heavy lifting we do in this business, the work, like the production of reports, the actual application of our intelligence, is going to be systemized and made easier, not replaced. I mean, Conquest can replace a simple case, but frankly, I like to say it makes the worst advisor produce something of value, and it makes better advisors even better, because now it's testing all this stuff I wouldn't have time for before, and I can still apply my knowledge over top of it. So it's still early. We're starting to see some players emerge. I can get into generative AI as we talk, but in general, it is going to be something that fundamentally changes the way our time is spent. And by that, it's going to fundamentally change how this industry works.
Yeah. So having financial advisors as clients, a lot of times I hear that they spent an enormous amount of time on the servicing. What you're talking about, that's going to be reduced dramatically.
Yep.
You said something really important, though, that is that I think needs to be highlighted is that, and I had somebody else on the show a number of months ago that talked about this from an artist perspective. It's not going to make a poor artist amazing, but it'll make a good artist better, right?
Oh,
Or a great
absolutely.
artist better because of the tools, because you kind of have to know what you're doing and to recognize and to validate that the recommendations that are coming out are actually accurate.
Well,
So
this is the
yeah.
thing, right? So this is the thing about generative AI in particular, right? Congratulations. You can throw up a blog post, write about anything. You can create almost anything these days. I was experimenting and sending some clips to for an upcoming presentation I have in February on artificial intelligence, where an AI avatar of me is speaking perfect Mandarin, right? Like creation, generative AI can create anything. Here's the problem, right? Who you have to know, like basically most people will believe it, but it's not right a lot of the time. So if
Yeah.
any, the value of the expert who can call BS on the AI just became infinitely more valuable because frankly, it's not the entry level people are the ones who suffer the most because like they're still learning. They don't know what's what. They're going to believe what they hear necessarily. They're going to build up a foundational knowledge to then basically turn around and be able to say, hey, no, that's not how it's done. And we need to correct the AI to do that. It's the people at the top who have this knowledge already that just became far more valuable because we're the only ones who can basically call BS and we're the ones who can fix it, quite honestly.
Yeah. So how does this affect the client on the other end? We'll come back to the financial advisors in a
Yep.
moment, but for the people who are listening are going, okay, great. So my financial advisor is going to be able to run all these scenarios with using AI that they wouldn't otherwise. But how is that going to affect the relationship with them and even the need for this financial advisor? Can I go on
Yeah,
be the
no,
devil's
but
advocate, right? Can I go on the website and do it myself kind of thing?
look, there's already like
It's
here's the
already
thing.
happening. People are already
It's
doing
already
that.
happening. People DIY a bunch of stuff, but I think that there's a real challenge. I mean, again, they don't know what's what to call BS on things. And the other thing is too is that um, frankly, we're talking about solving a numbers issue. We're not talking about solving a gray matter issue. The reality is that what is optimal from a numerical standpoint is not optimal from a behavioral standpoint most of the time. So, for instance, in
It's
many
true.
cases, I can tell people, look, shoot, you can just if you invest on 100% stock starting from age 20 until all your retirement assets are going to be in 100% stock until you retire, and then we'll talk about stuff afterwards. That is the optimal mathematical solution. However, the number of people can actually tolerate the volatility associated with that is a fraction of the population, a tiny fraction of the population. And if anything, doing that can actually endanger them in the future because if they panic at the bottom, and everybody always panics at the bottom, and get out, they can cause themselves damage that it could take decades to repair. So the reality is that if we were perfect operational machines that basically took orders, yeah, no problem. AI can start giving the orders. We aren't. We are a bag of trauma and experience and messes and conflicting needs and desires and hormones and whatever else it is. And without a human being in the middle to bridge that, to basically say, okay, the machine says X. I understand what came out of the machine. I understand the context, but here's where it's not going to where it's going to work and where it's not going to work. I can coach my client around getting past some of these traumas and the issues they've had in their past. However, certain things I'm not going to be able to get past. So where is that middle ground? How do I synthesize this? And where do I not necessarily take the AI output and make it happen? Where do I take the client input on their emotional stuff the AI is not capturing and then modify the answer to get me a solution that may not be 100% optimal, but maybe it's 90% optimal and it works for them. That's the need.
Yeah. Which brings me to back to the financial advisors in terms of what their role is going to evolve, not necessarily change, because I think it's always been that, but it's
Mhm.
going to evolve where it's not so much about knowing I mean, obviously they need to know how to call PS and all that, and they need to be experts. But it's really more about like the psychology of working with clients is what you're saying, and understanding how to navigate through all of that human, the humanness.
Correct. And let's take a step back and look at the evolution in general. Okay. So the industry started off way back about simply just access to investing, right? Like it was just brokerage, right? And
Right.
then that became democratized through technology and evolution. And then suddenly, oh, now we're about putting together comprehensive portfolios because we have the expertise to do that. Okay. Well, that became commoditized and easy to access as well. And then, basically financial, and I will say the best thing to happen in the industry was realizing that, hey, you know what? If we just actually figure out what people need in life, we can actually, you know, tell them what to do and sell them more stuff and actually like benefit from that. And the industry went through this point where it went from a sales and product, where it's still fighting this, where it was all sales and product, to consulting, to planning. Like planning was this thing that you just did to sell product.
Yeah.
And over time we found that, wait a sec, all this stuff gets commoditized. We can't control markets. We can the portfolio stuff is actually quite straightforward these days, but it's flipping. It's flipping on its head where people are like, wait a sec, all of this stuff around planning and organizing people's lives, not only can we control this is where we can truly add value. So the emergence has gone from just, commodity, just I'll give you access, to I'll do it for you, to I'll help you plan your life. And it's going to further evolve into where you're saying, into the behavioral side. And the key is, I want to take away from this, like, I'll give you examples of other softwares I've seen in the US. And I'll make a point with this. There's a bunch of them now in the estate space where they will take a will, scan it in, extract all the information from it, tell you if there's any errors, and basically summarize the entire will for you within moments, absolutely, just in a couple minutes. And if it, based on other inputs and information that are given to it from that source or other sources, it can actually make recommendations for how you should change the will, right? And we can guide the client in that. Now, here's the thing. Was I doing that already? Yeah, I was. I was reading the will, making notes, and taking the better part of, 45 minutes to an hour to go over that, versus 5 minutes now,
Yeah.
right? So that's the thing, is it's all again, I'm going back to the heavy lifting, the work to get to the knowledge, to
Yes.
get with the knowledge of the client is going to just diminish, just like a lot of administrative back office tasks that are highly repetitive. I mean, AI is designed to destroy highly repetitive tasks that are the same all the time.
Right.
That is exactly what's going to happen. So all this stuff that my staff does, preparing like account opening documentation, like all of this stuff, administrative work, that is all going to be diminished, and it's going to basically be allowing us to spend time on the more high value stuff. Now, let's go to the human side. Let's go to a very important thing, because in business, there's only two ways to make money. Everyone in the middle suffers. There's a chasm. On one end, you are a volume business. You basically take low margin on a commodity and you sell the heck out of it in large volumes, right?
Right.
The other end is a deeply customized experience that provides a value beyond that of the commodity, right? So the examples I use all the time are the examples of, basically McDonald's versus the 3 Michelin star restaurant. Everybody's heard McDonald's. You may not have heard some of the best 3 Michelin star restaurants in the world. Who do you think makes more money on a per location basis? Right? If they're doing it right, at least, right? That's
Yeah.
the reality of it. And, I'm willing to spend 100x what I do at McDonald's to go to this other restaurant, even though they're both providing nourishment. You can call it the
Right.
base quality of it. So the reality is that there's only two ways that you can either service a few people incredibly well, or you can service all the people very cheaply. Here's the problem. As an advisor, you can't live here. You can't live on the cheap side, right?
Yeah.
Because the problem is you'll get smoked. Like, frankly, you don't see technology scales, humans don't, right? Right now, yes, you can have a middle ground where people want to use a robo advisor and then go to a financial planner on the side. There's a market for that. But in terms of scaling and providing, basically where the profits are, it's on the sides. It's never in the middle. The middle is some weird mishmash where basically you try to eke out of existence. So if anything, this is going to polarize even more everything that's happening. So, and what's already happened in the industry in general. So you look at the average number of households per advisor in Canada. That number sits around 300. Here's the problem with that. There's a concept called the Dunbar number. It basically says that the human mind cannot deal with an infinite number of connections. It can only basically keep track of what about 150 people, who they are and what they do. Now let's be generous and assume that a couple, so in my mind, in an advisor's mind, equals the personal unit that I have to keep track of. Okay, that means 150. But subtract out my friends, family, everybody else in my life that matters. Now I'm like at 100. So realistically, I can't provide, no one wants an experience with an advisor who says they're providing white glove service and all this other stuff, where they have to say, hold on a sec, let me open up my CRM and look over our notes and see who it is you are, right?
Yes.
They, someone who, when they call, hey, John, how's it going? Yeah. It says, oh, so did your son, that broken arm, is that, did he get that resolved? Like, what's going on there? Yeah. And okay, so you're due to buy that car next month. Oh, you decided to push that off? That's great. Like, they want recall. They don't want to be treated like a stranger. They want to be treated like a friend, quite honestly, someone who understands them deeply. Every advisor says they understand their clients, but I always say, like, show me the math. If the math
Yeah.
doesn't prove it, then I'm sorry, the brain is not capable of handling it. So you're full of it. So if anything, what this is going to do, and this has also been a trend in the US for years, where the RIA market has largely differentiated itself on service offering and planning centricity. And basically the trend has gone from large books to 100 households to 80 houses to 60 households. Like, that's where you see that they're getting smaller. But conversely, they're not being all things to all people. They're being more things to a few people, providing broader services, broader offerings. There's only so many services we can offer in financial services, but frankly, the deep understanding of the client and helping them move beyond the the psychological limitations of what's holding back in finance, that is the final frontier of this. It is being that final, financial therapy is a new emerging field. That is something that is going to be the future of advice.
Oh, I love this. And I'm going to send this to every single one of my clients. Of course, I was going to do that anyway.
Fair enough.
But talking about this idea of reducing the number of households to be able to service those clients well is what you're
Yeah.
talking about. And I didn't have any numbers on how many is that threshold, but it tends to be around, when you talk about 150, 100, 150, it's somewhere in there
And that's
before it
already too
starts.
much, in my opinion, quite honestly.
Yeah, because of all the other relationships that they have. So that's really powerful. And it's interesting because you take one advisor who might have X number of households and is doing, and has a volume of business that's, Y. And then you take somebody else and it could be the same number of households, but have so much more or so much less in that. And so, here they are trying to eke out the existence. You mentioned about the in the middle. That's where most of the advisors, I don't know, 98% of the advisors, 95%, I don't know what the number is, but in the middle of that, trying to eke out the existence and are wearing themselves. I see it. They're wearing themselves out.
Let's go back to the restaurant example. Okay. So I have the Michelin star restaurant on one side, I have the McDonald's on the other side. Both of them should be highly profitable, especially if they're this one, because what they bring in, all they got to do is control their costs and they'll be highly profitable.
Yeah.
How many local restaurants are basically sustenance businesses?
Oh, I mean,
the local restaurants, and they have horrible failure rates. But again, where's the differentiation? They've got okay food, right? They've got an average experience. I don't feel special when I go there necessarily. Maybe they don't even know me. The reality is that everybody, the mistake is everybody thinks because they can cook, they can open a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that they can get licensed, they can be an advisor. But the reality is to be a good one.
Yes.
Where is your differentiation point? And frankly, the only moat that exists, the only real moat that exists, is that you ask every advisor what's one of the things what is the things that differentiates them. Everybody's going to say they care. Everyone's going to say they care. Got news for you: caring's table stakes. Show me that you actually do.
Yes.
Show me that you actually do, because they'll say that, and then I also hear things like, well, markets were down and I was hiding from my phone. What did they hide you? What did they hire you for? Right.
Yeah.
Or they'll be like, oh, that got really awkward because it got into their medical condition, or like she started crying because of whatever else, or they're going through a divorce. And guess what, people? If you really are here to help people, let me take a step back. The best version, the fullest, most the ultimate version of this industry, of what it is to be a financial planner, is to be someone who sits across from a client and ask them how they can live the best version of their lives, and then guide them through the process to get there, no matter how messy it gets.
Yes.
Right. And the reality is that, and those relationships, I know my relationships, the most solid ones have been forged in the moments of their pain and anguish, unfortunately. Right. I'm there for them and I do what I can to support. And that's just partially being a human being and wanting to support them, but also defining, going beyond the definition of standard financial services. I am not here just to run their investments. I am not here to basically make sure they're insured. I am not here to make sure their wills and powers of attorney are executed. I am here to help them live the best version of their lives. And when you think in that regard, right, those moments that they're there for, that you're uncomfortable with, guess what? That's what you're actually there for. It's to get them.
Yeah. I'm a coach, and that's, yeah, it's a little like therapy, and so that financial therapy that you talked about becoming a growing industry, I think is so powerful. So how can financial advisors prepare? And I started off talking about AI, and then we would talk about AI, and we are, and AI as a tool to allow you to do what you're actually supposed to be doing. In that context, how do financial advisors prepare themselves and set up their business operations, set up, and start moving in this direction so they can be,
Yeah.
Ideally they're not going to be able to be the McDonald's and survive. We know that, right? But to be able to create a practice that future proof their practice and build a practice that has legacy and lasting impact.
Yeah, I think you used the key word you used there. We're going to go back to is tool. Okay. This entire concept, it doesn't matter what artificial intelligence is targeted at. Everybody's like, oh, we're going to put these people out of business, right? It's like, I've heard the number of times I've heard advisors going to be put out of business by discount brokers, by robo advisors, and now by artificial intelligence. We're not. There's a reason. It's because humans like dealing with humans. And unfortunately, and the humans far better at dealing with the messy stuff. So you got a truly good advisor, a truly great advisor, they're irreplaceable. Now, let's talk about how you become irreplaceable and how your practice gets managed by that. The first and most important thing is always, and I will always be shocked by this when I see people who have the bare minimum and stuff, education. You need to never stop learning, whether that be about how the business works. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to piss off a lot of your customers with this final statement. All of you spending your time on nothing but markets, you're wasting your bloody time. Just believe it. End of the day, it's been proven a million times over. Active management doesn't work. You get rid of that and you start focusing on the things you can control. And guess what? All that time that you were wasting on things that the academics proved you're wasting your time on, suddenly you have more time. And that time can be spent on practice management, deeper relationships. So I just pissed off a bunch of people. Too bad. Send me your hate mail. I don't care. I will send you back the academic studies proving you're wrong. But here's the point. Focus on the things you can't control. So what can you control in your practice? First and foremost, artificial intelligence loves process, right? Do you have clean records? Do you have clean data? Do you have processes? People will come to me and say, I want to digitize my practice. I want to, streamline my process. I'm like, great, what process? And they're like, take me through what you do. And it's this discombobulated, amorphous thing that hasn't been written down. Sit down with a piece of paper and pencil. Jot down everything you do in a process. Eliminate the stuff that doesn't need to happen. That is the first start, right? Then back to the education piece. You have to be aware of what's possible. Okay. So aware of what's possible. Unfortunately, what can I say? I'll plug my podcast on technology. There's not really a lot of other options out there. There's not a ton of, in Canada, there really are very few options for where to learn about technology. It's my podcast. There's a conference that I help put on every year called the Canadian Advisor Tech Expo. Happens in November. We're going to see where it lands this year in scheduling, but also American conferences. I just came back from the big trade show in the US for this, right? T3. And a lot of it was just what is out there, what is new, what is cutting edge, what is coming, what can I leverage? So, first and foremost, I guess, be a business owner, right? Too often, advisors run a practice. They don't run a business. So be a business owner. A business owner cares about process and automation, all this stuff. If you ran a factory, you wouldn't be sitting there saying, it's okay if we still stick with wood whittling. You'd be like, no, where's that lathe that I can automate? Like the reality is, think of it like a business, because most advisors don't. So that's the awareness part, the learning part. The learning piece, when it comes to the human side, is even more important because, frankly, this is a new skill. It's going to take a lot of practice. And unlike so many other things in this industry, which are geared toward helping us sell stuff, right? A lot of what happens in behavioral science and behavioral therapy is understanding of concepts and awareness of what to look for so that you can reflect in yourself and in the other client what is going on, right? So I have many friends in this space. I'm blessed with that. Some of the top behavioral experts in my space. And I'm going to plug my friend Brian Portnoy's platform at Shaping Wealth, which basically he's got something called the Outsourced Chief Behavioral Officer, which is an online platform where you get new education on this, new sessions all the time. It is a great place to get exposure to it and start to learn. From there, there's programs out there. There's other thought leaders like, other friends of mine, Dale Crosby, Megan Lertz, I'm forgetting Moira Summers, who's Canadian, one of the few, and the Preston Cherry. So there's lots of great content emerging out of the U.S. in this space. Brad Klontz is another one who just wrote a book on the psychology of financial planning, which sits behind me, which is endorsed by the CFP board. So the reality is that you have to basically take in an understanding. And a lot of this is individuals searching through your own personal traumas and financial, traumas in your past, to recognize that in other people, and a real self-awareness. Really, what you really are developing is the self-awareness of a therapist to some degree. Not that I'm ever going to replace a therapist in any way, shape, or form, but acknowledging when a client needs that kind of help beyond me is important, and being able to adapt to understand them on a deeper level just makes it easier for me to help them succeed. So that's it. So like, stay educated, like never stop learning. I will say that the best conferences I go to every year, I by far, with few exception in Canada, like the IFP conference, again, I'm conflicted there, but it is a great conference. There's a bunch of good technical conferences like STEP, but when it comes to the human side of this, like, there's very little resources or technology, very little resources. I named 3. That's it. There's a few more that maybe you want to consider. Most advisors in Canada get their education from their dealerships and their fund companies. The dealership, you got to go to those just to know what's going on. Stop going to fund companies. Like, just stop going to your suppliers. They got an agenda. It's one agenda: sell my stuff, right? U.S. conferences like Future Proof, T3, WealthStack, and RA Edge. Like, there's dozens upon dozens of them. Excel, like, you can look at Michael Kitces, who's, I hope if everybody hasn't discovered Michael Kitces, who's an advisor on this, listening to this, you are doing yourself a disservice. He is the god of all this stuff. And his blog and his podcasts are incredible. But he has a listing of all the top U.S. conferences and different reasons you would go to them. Great place to start. Great place to start. And I'll tell you what I love about going to U.S. conferences. It's like traveling forward into the future. I get to see what an industry can look like 20 years down the road. And I can talk to people from all over the world who attend these things and see what it's like elsewhere. And one of the things it's always been said is, you're very ahead of these trends. How are you ahead of these trends? And like, A, I actually read what the regulators are trying to accomplish. B, we're all around the world. The entire industry is on the same trajectory. We're all heading in this direction. We're just at different development points in the curve, right? So when you understand what things look like in Australia, things look like in the UK, in the US, South Africa, heck, India, Russia, all over the place, you can see the similarities and differences. And you can see that, like I said, we're all kind of pointing in the same direction. So if you can look at where everybody else is ahead, you're looking into the future when you come home.
Yeah. Well, I love this. And you are advocating for some of the things that I talk about in my coaching. It's this idea of stop, because, especially the last few years, some of the advisors that I've been working with have been so consumed by what's happening in the world. And it's like there's a fear, right?
What control do they have over that?
You have no control over that. So stop watching all of that stuff. Yeah, you need to be aware of what's going on, but focus on what you can control and what you can impact, and maybe and how you can support your clients, because your clients are having these issues and concerns. And how can you support them, that no matter what this all looks like, you can still get them to the destination that you set out for.
Look, going back to what you can control and what you can't. Okay, so I can't control that Russia invaded Ukraine. I can't control any of the craziness going on. I sure as I can't do anything about the U.S. election. The reality is that, and despite all this, what's happened with markets? Over all this panic, companies still make money. Their prices still go up. Like, this is, as long as you believe that capitalism and the modern Western society will continue. Well, just people need to make money. End of the day, as long as businesses exist, then basically you believe there's an opportunity here. Otherwise, I mean, the alternative is we're living in, the Walking Dead world. Like, the reality is that, can you imagine? So can you imagine that? Like, it's the reality is, what can we control, right? We can control most of our time. When it comes to client portfolios, we only really have 2 things we control: the allocation and the methodology in which we disperse invest money. The allocation, got news for you: don't mess with it, because there's plenty of academic studies that show that, if you pick the right allocation based on the risk tolerance and capacity and everything else we're supposed to do under regulation now, because now it's actually regulation, you do the proper tolerance assessment. If you get that right and you try to tinker with to be opportunistic, odds are you're going to end up with an adverse return. That's the statistics. It's a negative alpha. Secondly, like, knock stock picking again, but you can use passive investments, factor-based investments, whatever it is. Once you deploy that, you shouldn't be messing with it. You should stay abreast of new products and new alternatives to that. And that's basically it. But once you've actually done that, like, I got to tell you, I had one panicked phone call during COVID. One about the portfolio. That was it. And even then, that panic was subsided immediately after I told them what actually happened in their portfolio. So if you have your phones ringing off the table, it means you're not paying attention to the things you should be paying attention, which is making sure that the investment matches the risk profile of the client. You do that, and you're miles ahead. Then, and guess what? You can actually, the most systemized part of my business is the investment management process, and it's all documented in one document. That's it. Why? Because we got this thing running on rails. We got a methodology. We got it all. And I'm not sitting back worrying about what Putin's doing tomorrow because I can't control that. And you know what? By the time it happens, it's too late to do anything about it. That's the reality
Yeah.
of it. One of the things I got an interview coming up with CNBC on AI. We had a pre-interview, and one of the things that was mentioned was people who think that artificial intelligence is going to improve their ability to stock pick. It's like, yeah, so massively. So if you got that, everybody else has got it, and like now, and then basically they're all reacting within milliseconds again and acting, and all that's happened is you created a more efficient clearing price mechanism, right? Like markets are the most highly evolved gladiatorial arena of all time, with billions, if not trillions, with like GDPs of entire nations thrown at them to try to eke out this little bit of outperformance. And any advisor who thinks that sitting around without any of those resources, they're going to basically add that is fooling themselves. Your time is better spent making sure the client is in the right place, that you've managed their risk tolerance, you manage your expectations, that you put in place financial plans, and that you've guided them through everything else in life.
Yeah.
It is a more fulfilling, enjoyable, and beneficial way to run this business.
So who's your ideal client?
So my ideal client, so my firm has different ideal profiles, right? Because we have multiple advisors. I think mine, where I really benefit is a couple of places. So I gotta say my wheelhouse is complexity. I do like complex cases just for the amusement of it all. So typically business owners or American citizens they've reached a level of wealth and cash flow generation that effectively, look, they're too busy running their business. They're successful. They need to delegate. I want someone who wants to delegate, who respects and values the knowledge and the expertise of others, who basically is going to just let me do the job and come back to them and say, this is, I know you, I know this. This is how we're going to fix it. All right, great. And if they have an issue with that, I'm going to work with them collaboratively. Not someone who wants to have a transactional relationship, not someone who's going to sit down and say, well, the S&P did this and you did this last month. It's like, if I have to have that conversation on a regular basis, I would rather just say I'm not the person for you, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Right. So really it's someone, again, and frankly, lovely people, likes to work the too short to deal with jerks, quite honestly. So, basically people who are a pleasure to deal with, who basically actually have the need in their lives where I can truly add value to it. And that's me, right? My business partner is really, really good at people transitioning into retirement and later in retirement. That's a really big anxiety and panic moment for them, right? Like, oh my God, like I'm going to lose my identity. They don't have the thing, but they're going to lose their identity. They're going to lose that paycheck. How are they going to survive? Do they have enough? Oh my God, markets are crazy. Like, it takes them about the 5 years leading up and the first 5 years in retirement are the absolute peak of that panic. By the time they hit, their early 70s, whatever else it is, they've eased into their lives, right? He's really good at seeing them through that, and which is again a behavioral lesson in patience and how to basically take people's anxiety away. My newest associate, he's been told his only job for the first couple of years was to basically get his feet under him, but after that, he's going to have to figure out where he provides the most value so we can actually effectively market to those people. Because again, you can't be all things to all people. You got to be all you can be, but you can be a lot of things to some, right? So again, with me, it's I could go into industry if I'm not going to pick a specific industry. I don't have to. I've got enough info. I can choose who I want to work with. But for anyone else, and I'm just to expand upon this, anyone who comes into the business or is looking to transform or grow in this business, my advice to them is always the same thing. Pick a niche. Pick a type of person. Like, especially if you're new at this, okay? If you're new at this, everybody's out there servicing everybody. You know what everybody says on their website? I service business owners, executives, and high net worth families. My website is guilty of doing the same thing, but all you're saying is I service people with money, right?
Yeah.
My website does better though. It goes into here's how the service offerings differentiated for all three of those groups. Okay. The next website is going to be far more hyper specific on the types of challenges we help with and the profiles and everything else. And I just need to find the time to do it, but I will. And I've worked with other young advisors where they're developing niches specifically around doctors within geographic locations, around certain specializations, around one who's basically working with midwives. He came to me with this idea. I was like, what's the story there? And he told me about their challenges and the optimal size. I said, okay, the business is going to have to be designed to support this many people, which is more than, it's not going to be super white glove, but you can provide real deep value to that group, right? And I've seen some really crazy niches out of the US. Like I remember one, I think it was dentists within a tri-state area looking to sell their practice in the next 5 years to a private equity firm. This was a guy who
Wow.
knew how to go in there and within 5 years help them maximize their enterprise value to organize that exit and how to structure the exit. My favorite, champion fisherman. Basically, this guy grew up in the industry. He understands what it is to be a champion fisherman, which I had no idea. You win one of these things, you get a 6-figure check handed to you, right? And you don't know when the next one's going to happen. And you win a couple of them, suddenly there's endorsement deals. What does a good endorsement deal look like, right? I don't know. You think anyone
Yeah.
goes and deals with anyone other than this guy who knows that business inside and out? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I'll tell people, and this is something that in Canada, very few people are doing. Very few people, or the specializations are huge. It's like all doctors or women, or like no one's zeroing in that much. That is a huge market opportunity as to say, you know what? There's a common challenge amongst this type of business owner or this type of executive or this type of just T4 employee. They really all have a similar story. And there's actually one in the US that was also great too. It's a website. They specifically cater to mid-career women in technology. Specifically, I think they're based in the Seattle area. You go to their website, you read the first couple of lines, you know exactly if it's you or not. And here's the thing. Yes, people will go there and leave because it's not them. But people who are that person are 10 times more likely to reach out because now you're speaking their language.
Yeah. Well, I love that. The power in, what is the saying? There's riches and niches. It's this idea of like,
Absolutely.
you can specialize and you spend the time there. You understand the language, so many reasons why you want to do that. So,
No.
and it makes your life more enjoyable. I mean, yeah, we want to learn, but rather
Yeah.
than learning and figuring out the basic level of things, we can then focus on the learning how to serve those clients better and the finer distinctions that allow for that. Yeah.
Correct. And I'll go back to my two profiles, the big ones again being
Mm.
US citizens, right? Like US citizens living in Canada. There's very few advisors or shops working in the space. I mean, there's a lot more who will say like, oh, I specialize in cross-border because some of them, they'll manage investments across the border. I don't even know. I'm not being negative about my peers here. I met plenty of them who don't have the same situation, but I have a CFP on both sides of the border. I don't think I've met anyone else who has yet. I know that when I looked into it, there was maybe 2 or 3 other people. So I have like financial planning specialization designations in both sides of the border. Other people that are really good at this figured it out, do taxes. Like not taking away from them, but the majority of people in this space saying they do cross border just because they're able to manage investments on the other side of the border. That's not a specialization. That's a utility, right? So like being able to talk to these people about how to structure their lives and their businesses and whatever else it is, and how to deal with issues around social security and estate planning, all this other stuff. I'm speaking their language because they grew up in an environment where that was the stuff that I'm using, the nomenclature that they were using, right? Now that's easier. That's a harder complexity, but easier, but a simple way to demonstrate knowledge. The business owners, like there's a certain level of maturity that I tend to deal with, right? And it's basically they've gotten to the point where they're at a stage where they've done a corporate reorganization. They know if the structure is right. The complexity has gotten away from them, right? And typically, I'm dealing with business owners. Let's call it. I think really when they hit the 50 to 100 employees mark is where I do the best work. It's because it's a symbol of their lives have gotten to this level of complexity. Their cash flows are incredibly good. They just want to start living their lives. They got to start figuring what their succession plan is. All of this, and I'm able to really kind of speak not to the operational things that keep them up at night, but to everything else that keeps them up at night. But also being a business owner myself, can I commiserate with them about the challenges of HR and everything else and dealing with banks when it comes to refinancing? Like, yes, I lived those experiences. So there's a commonality, right? So being able to speak their language on their level, and better yet, being able to translate what the lawyer and the accountant are saying to them into plain English becomes invaluable.
Yeah, that's gold. Jason, thank you so very much. I was looking forward to this conversation and did not disappoint at all. I really, really enjoyed it. And I know there's just so much value. And this is one of those episodes that, people are going to want to re-listen to and take notes on and really explore what it would mean for them in their own business. So again, thank you so much. And we'll make sure your websites are in the show notes, woodgate.com, jasonpereira.com, and all the links so people can connect with you and your podcast and all that good stuff. So thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners for, and watchers, viewers for being here. We appreciate you and hope that you've enjoyed this. I always say leaders of transformation take action. Transformation doesn't happen unless you actually do something. And sometimes that doing is actually stepping back and reflecting, being the business owner and looking and assessing the lay of the land and saying, where are we at right now? Where are we going? And what is it going to take to get us from here to there? And having that self-awareness to know where you're strong and maybe where you're not, and maybe where you've overcommitted. And, there's so much there. And so I would encourage you to take action on something that you learned here today, even if it's just taking some time to be the business owner, so that you can step out of the game for a little bit. And so we encourage you to do that. We'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersofttransformation.com. You can find us on social and reach out to us that way. We'd love to hear how this has impacted you and how we can support you and be continuing to be the leader of transformation that you're capable of being. So again, thank you so much for being here. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of the Leaders Transformation. Bye for now.